So who's going to win on Saturday?
Well, the answer to that is very simple. No one. And worse yet, I think the losers may be Sabahans.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to ZAID Ibrahim Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Bridget Welsh, very well-known political analyst, and if I'm not mistaken, a naturalized Sabahan now. Because she spent so much time in Sabah. Okay, Bridget. The subject we're going to talk about is all about election in Sabah, and I have not been to Sabah for many years now. I don't know the situation. You have been there for so long. I understand you have visited all the 73 constituencies. So who's going to win on Saturday?
Well, the answer to that is very simple. No one. In the sense that I expect that it will be a hung situation in terms of the overall major coalitions and parties. And worse yet, I'm not. I think the losers may be Sabahans, because the circumstances, once you have a situation where you have the parties, that it'll be very much about elites and elite deals again. But that said, I think in the next few days, this is going to be very pivotal, because the margins are very, very slim in so many seats.
Yes. And like they always describe Sabah politics as like money-driven. Is there any different now?
Oh, yes. I think there are big differences now. I think Sabahans, their voices are much louder than before. We can see that the interconnectivity, even into the interior areas, has made people more aware of issues. Yes, there are some seats where vote banks matter, and there are some seats where cost of money is an integral part of the campaign. But I think we can see this greater awareness, and I think that people must not recognize that when people vote on these issues of connected to money, they're voting because of pragmatic interests at the local level. So the candidates and support from the system matters, because the institutions in Sabah are comparatively weaker. So you need to have those connections to be able to carry out your life for many Sabahans at the local levels. So money plays a slightly different role. It's not just about the message of corruption and vote buying. It's an integral part of what's happening on the ground.
And what about the candidates? What's your observation? The quality of the candidates, the strength of the candidates now compared to before?
So first of all, you have over 600 of them. Right? So, and I think that what's really interesting is that people really get to choose.
Yeah.
And I think in more than any election that I've studied, the candidate factor has been really important. So what happened is, I've described this in my writing. So we have a situation where you have a swarming effect. So there's so many people swarm, numbers come in. And then you have the element of trying to split the vote. So no matter what, one candidate is going to have their family members. That's usually maybe at maximum 100 people, could be 50, but some families are quite big in Sabah, right? Integrated and connected to the communities. And then you have the sifting effect. So what we saw in this first part of this week is that people started to choose who are the top 3 that I want, or who are the main contenders. And then, what do they look at? They look at their personality. They look at what they stand for, and they know people, right? These are constituencies that they know who these people are, and many of them have been around for quite some time. So you've had a lot of recycling of candidates by some of the parties, and then you've had a lot of people who were hoppers who've hopped to different parties. So you have 2 parties, for example, that have a lot of hoppers in them in that context. So we see a situation where there's a lot of recycling, but at the same juncture, there are a lot of new faces. So the candidate and the personality of the candidate matters. Now, in this last few days, money and what the parties stand for and the issues that are swinging the campaign are mattering. So we can see it changes and evolves. The candidates, there are some good ones. I think what we see among the younger candidates is a recognition that there needs to be a different type of governance for Sabah. So this is, the last election of the older members and oldies of people that came in when UMNO first, for example, came into Sabah. Now we see a lot of younger people in their 40s. I talk about them as the Sabah Turks, and these are people who see the need to kind of have concrete deliverables to change a situation on the ground, and they are across different political parties. They're not just in one. So this youth generational shift is changing, and I would argue some of the younger leaders in Sabah are among the most talented across the country compared to the generation deficit that we see in Peninsula Malaysia.
Okay, I want to come back to this. No party is going to win on its own, right? Which means that you're going to have, 2 or 3 groupings forming the government? Is that how you say it? Or is it going to be so terrible that, probably, let's say Warisan, which is the biggest bloc, I think. Let's say they get less than 20, which means they're short by 17 to form a government. Does that 17, that's what I don't know, you can get it from some larger parties, or is it going to be like all over the place? How do you think the government's going to function on that basis?
So if we look at previous Sabah politics, 1 or 2 seats make a difference in forming a government.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
So I think so every seat will count. And let me just say, especially if Sabahans are listening to this podcast, go and vote. Your vote will count. It will make a difference. I really think this is very important for them to understand. Now, how will it break down? This is very interesting. I think we've got essentially 3 major blocks. We have the first block, of course. They're almost tied in terms of the potential ways that they can move, right, and numbers. So one block, of course, as you've mentioned, I'll start with you, is Warisan. And Warisan's fortunes are going to be determined by how many of the East Coast seats they were able to consolidate. And there is a Warisan wave going on right now in the last few days, especially on the East Coast. And then how many of the urban seats on the northern part of the West Coast that they can win. So seats that they, for example, like Darao, which is or a seat like Bungawan, where they have an incumbent. These are seats where I think these will really be kind of interesting to watch. They don't do very well in the interior areas and in the northern.
Why is that?
Because they're associated with the undocumented persons issues, right? These things are very sensitive, especially among the KDM communities, right? And they also don't have the same machinery. So, for example, in the interior areas, the Warisan's campaign is a spirit campaign. It's a messaging campaign. It's not as strong on machinery, and it doesn't have candidates that are local there. And if they do, they've lost some ground in the communities. So I think they have gaps. But the fact is Warisan, it's going to determine how much the frontier and how much the wave moves in their favor. For GRS, which I think came into this election in the strongest position because it had the most incumbents that had safe seats. And they still have a fair amount of incumbents that still have those safe seats.
So GRS still very strong?
It's strong. It's a player in this election.
Oh.
Right? So because you have...
I thought after all the scandal, it would be...
Well, scandals don't count so much in Sabah from the perspective.
Is that so?
Because for ordinary voters, corruption is something that's been long established, right? So they don't see the corruption issue the way the media reports it here.
Oh,
right?
I see.
So
and you don't think it's going to change on this issue? This is a big issue.
It's going to change in the urban areas, but it won't necessarily change in the rural and semi-rural areas. Right?
All right.
So going back to GRS, so GRS has got I can immediately think of a handful of seats that they have in the bag, right? So the former chief minister Hajiji's seats, Sulaiman, right? Masidi Majun, who is very popular in Karanaan, right? In Kuala Lumpur, which is on the west coast, you have a very popular candidate who has been well established, Limas Juri. In one of the interior seats, a place like Kwamut, they have someone like Basyong Banon, right? These are among the leaders, and even a more competitive seat like Kundasang, where PBS is part of GRS, is actually has a good chance of winning Joachim Gonsalem in this seat. So you can these safer seats for them and the incumbent factor. And so for many Sabahans, they think about the GRS as the government. And so they want to be with the government because of the vulnerabilities that they face. They want to have access to be able to have social services, and the government has had more resources at the state level.
Of course.
So that's the second block. And then the third block, and it's not so clear how big a block it's going to be, is Barisan Nasional. They have the long-standing seats that they have won, and they have a better machinery. But of course, that machinery was cut in half by GRS. GRS took many of the machinery of UMNO because many of them were UMNO. Right? When they formed Bersatu, when they formed, and so they have cut the machinery of Barisan Nasional. So Barisan Nasional is fighting very hard on the ground to the seats that they've traditionally won, and they have very grounded candidates. In fairness to Barisan Nasional, they have the most among the most new candidates, of new faces, fielded a lot of young people in this contest, and I think it's interesting to see how that is going to play out. And I think what they've done also is they fielded people from different camps in UMNO politics. So it's not just one leader's group of people. It's actually a whole bunch of different people that they've brought in. So when they talk about having a chief minister that's based on more consensus, it's going to be based on what comes out on how many seats that they actually win in terms of who they're going to be pushing forward.
Okay. So we had your 3 blocks.
Well, 3 big blocks.
Three big blocks.
Many blocks.
What about Anwar's
like
block? Tell me, Anwar's block. PMX block.
I did. So you noticed I didn't talk about Pakatan Harapan's block in my conversation. Well, I think it's very interesting to see how many seats they can win. And I think they have chances in a lot of seats. And I think, and before this podcast, I sat down and ran the numbers in terms of my assessment. There are 31 seats out of 73 that are still very much in flux in these last days. Now, why are they in flux? Part of it is
31 out of
73.
73, yeah.
Right?
Awesome.
Why are they in flux? This is a very interesting question. Right? First of all, the calon factor is people are still considering. There's lots of choice. Number 2, there's a lot of fence sitters in Sabah because they're trying to see how the campaign moves in this context. People are watching. And Sabahans are traditionally much more open to different alternatives. And they've been watching the campaign very carefully. Third, of course, will be how much the question of turnout, of people turning down. And of course, part of that is about financial mobilization, of bringing out your vote. Right? So all of these things are going to be the things that determine in the last few days of what are the outcomes. Now, back to Pakatan Harapan. We can see that PKR is contesting it in 12. One of them resigns with 11 seats. He's pulled out, so it's 11 seats. We can see DAP is contesting in their 6 incumbent seats plus additional, so up to 9. Right? And of course, UPCO wasn't Pakatan Harapan but left, and I think they're contesting in 25 seats. So there are different blocks. So as I was saying earlier about the blocks, it's like Lego. You can't fully have a house until you have many different pieces together, right? But the circumstances about Pakatan Harapan is how many seats. DAP has a good chance of winning at least 3 of their seats, especially those in the KK area, such as Luyang and Likas and Kapayan. Kapayan is much closer. It's a much more fiercer fight. I think they're going to also face a challenge in Tanjung Aro, which they haven't contested before. And what's interesting, right, like in Peninsular Malaysia, we saw something, the Madani government, Pakatan Harapan, and UMNO, they had vote transferability. So people who voted for one would vote for the other, right? So if you would supported UMNO, you would vote this way, or if you voted for Pakatan Harapan, you would vote for UMNO in that particular seat. What's really also I'm watching is how much vote transferability there will be this time. Right, given that there's so much splitting, and the splitting is also tied to ethnic ties and religious ties. So I'm curious to see whether or not Pakatan Harapan will be able to do that. The other issue to get some vote transferability to them. Second issue I look at is how much their benefit of resources. So Pakatan Harapan has clearly used their federal government resources, especially PKR. So we can see those on the ground. So the seats that I'm looking at, like Maratai, Karamunting, these are seats that I think are very interesting to watch. In Annam, where they have the incumbent, Api-Api is a fascinating seat. It's really about PKR and Warisan going against each other. So there is a real fascinating dynamic. Some people say it will be limited, but this is why I think my own personal view is that we'll see if I'm correct, but it's been a risk for Anwar Ibrahim to put his picture all over the photographs and all over the posters.
Yeah, but that's what he's doing.
Well, but that's what every
That's
politician.
Anwar. Anwar likes the center stage. That's Anwar Ibrahim. He's never changed.
But to be fair, Muhyiddin Yassin did the same thing. Najib did the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so politicians put themselves up on the pictures.
Okay, you tell me again Anwar's impact on this election.
Well, I will say that there were three.
Yeah.
Okay, there are three impacts. Number one, his comments at Gaia Street had a very big impact of setting the tone of the campaign about the 40%. Right? This is something that I think Anwar Ibrahim faces as a challenge is what I, from as an academic point of view, a trust deficit. How much do people believe in him or don't believe in him right, in that context? That's a challenge from the Gaia Street comments. Second of all, I think that, to be the resources, the commitment, right? And I think that, to be fair, the Anwar government has probably given more funds to Sabah than any other government in recent history. Right? And they talk about that. It's a question of whether or not that reaches the ground, right? In terms of perceptions, people, and I think that's not the case. But in fairness, right, there has been a lot of movement on some of the issues of MA63 under the Madani government that has had substantive results. But I think those don't necessarily translate. So that's still a factor. He still talks about I paid this, I paid that, and some people absorb that, and others. And the third thing is that. He is the government. And the government will have a lot of power of deciding, number one, future resources for Sabah. Number two, the shaping the relationship with the federal state in terms of the government forming. You asked earlier about what happens in terms of the government forming. This is really interesting, right? Because it's now who seats, who can work with whom, and then also the TYT. Musa Aman will play a very pivotal role, have a lot of decision-making power. And Anwar Ibrahim will also have influence on this because he's the prime minister.
Okay. And what about Bersatu or PN? Can you talk about that?
Good question. In fact, actually, one of my columns that I'm trying to finish up is actually talking about the things that people aren't talking about. And this, the focus is obviously on scandals and other things in the campaign and the big players. But for Perkta National, to me, this is a test of whether or not they're truly a national party. And they have a chance maybe in one seat, maybe two maximum.
Oh.
There will be spoilers potentially in another seat. So in the seat of Sugut, where they're contested, where Ronald Candy, the MP for Bilaran, is contesting against James Ratib from GRS, both two local warlords, that's a very hot fight. Ronald Candy doesn't have the same kind of show posters and things like that James Ratib does, but he has grounded base, and there are lots of issues on the ground there. So I think he has a chance in that particular constituency. I think that also there are other races where in particular Perkta National is a spoiler, and that I think, or potentially could be a spoiler, and that is the race of Karambunai, where the PAS candidate, Ali Bakar, is running. And he is a lecturer, and of course he's portrayed himself as, he's a Sabahan, so we can noticeably see that this is a PAS candidate, but it's under the Perkta National flag. And so many candidates, even many of the voters in that constituency don't even know he's from PAS. So we can see that it's a very different thing. So whether or not they are a national party, I think will be something that this shows. And they will, of course, dismiss it, right? But the fact of the matter, it will be a test. A test I think that they will have a hard time passing.
Okay. Now, this, I want to talk a bit about Shafi Apdal, okay? He's the leader of Warisan. Yeah? Of course, he is what they call it, Sulu, or whatever, the tribe that they belong to. But he is seen in this part of the federation as more of a national person, not so much Sabah. Do you think that if Warisan were to do well in Sabah, you think he could be one of those future national leaders in this country, in this politics?
So first of all, I think that
He was in UMNO before.
of course,
that makes
most people were in UMNO. You were as well.
I am still.
I know.
They haven't sacked me yet.
Don't provoke.
No, I'm a nobody. It doesn't matter to them.
Well, I think that first of all, I think many Sabahan leaders are national in scope because they see from the periphery.
Yeah.
They see from the different perspective. And Sabah is a place, it's made up of 300 different ethnic groups.
300?
Including subgroups, right?
Oh.
So 36 or 37, depending on the counting, for major groups. So they definitely work together. And while there are differences and there are ethnic sentiments, as you would expect in any context, the fact is that they live very harmoniously together in the circumstances. And I think that brings a different way of living and a way of livelihood or perspective to politics. So I think Sabahans generally offer a very different type of perspective about issues. And I think that's also true of Sarawakians as well. Now, going to Shafi Apdal, I think he has been a bridge between Sabah and Peninsula Malaysia. And his dialogue evokes very strong reactions among those who want to see somebody who can embrace. And in fact, interestingly enough, one of the things that I found fascinating in talking to voters, and I mentioned earlier in the interior areas that people were a little bit more resistant to Warisan. But if I asked them sometimes, what do you think of Datuk Sri Shafi Apdal, they would say, oh, he made Christmas a holiday. And that's what they remember. Right? So they said, if I had to choose, I would choose him over that. Right? So I think that there is this sense of openness, and I think he's already a national leader.
Yes.
And leading his party. And I think his party has very strong support at the grassroots, especially among his community, but not exclusively. And, where he's been successful is that he has tapped into this local party sentiment, perhaps the most clearly way, besides UPCO, which I think has done that as well, to base and STAR. These three parties have been really pushing those issues. I think that has been quite effective. So, I give Shafi credit for having a more inclusive type of dialogue, and that irrespective who wins or others, that type of dialogue is an important part of what Malaysia needs to address its differences.
Okay, I know this is Sabah election, but I think the outcome will reverberate this side of the country, especially for your good friend Anwar Ibrahim. I'm sorry, I don't know whether you're a good friend, but I think if PH or Madani or some reason do not do so well in Sabah election, I think it will be negative for him here. I think it will have a serious impact for him here. What do you say to that?
So I'm very grateful to have friends across the political spectrum, including yourself. So number one is a first comment. Number two, I would say that I've written that this is a high-stakes election for Anwar Ibrahim.
High stakes?
High stakes. And I look at this from the context of how in 2020 it was a high-stakes election for Muhyiddin Yassin. And he did well, and he helped to consolidate himself. So anyone who thinks that Sabah elections are not important, you just have to look at the history of how these elections they have national implications, because and when candidates put their credentials on the line, it affects that. But what I think is different in this context are twofold. Number one, this is an election the first time the elements of the Madani government are fighting each other. In the state elections of 2023, that wasn't the case. Now they have to go head-to-head. It's Warisan against BN, against GRS, against Pakatan Harapan. They're all fighting each other. And it's a test, right? I mean, I've written that this is probably a good thing that this is happening in Sabah, because Sabah is a place that has greater civility. But the fact of the matter is that is something that has made the complexity, the messiness, but it has also put a test about whether or not the system works, right? So can you fight and then be friends? in that circumstances. So it'll impact not only the government, Anwar, but it also impacts Pakatan Harapan. It already has. We've seen one party leave, right? And then and it also impact the relationship between parties, because who wins vis-a-vis each other. So if, for example, one party doesn't do very well, that will have an impact. So I think it's a high-stakes election because it will be seen as a mandate. I think it's also a situation for setting the ground for what the elections are going to come in terms of GE16.
Okay, now we're going to come to the last part of this conversation. I just want your opinion. Yeah. This side of the divide, the federation issues of the opposition. I just want your take. From where we are, we see the opposition in somewhat disarray. There is no leadership of the kind expected. The kind of opposition leader in the Anwar mold in those days. Anwar would be firing every day of the week. And there's nobody else doing the firing, And everybody takes the cue from him. If he says 1 MDB, this is 1 MDB. If he says petrol, no more increase in petrol prices, everybody sings the same tune. We don't see that now. I know election's still another year, maybe in a year and a half.
Or two,
yeah. But do you think something needs to happen on the opposition side for it to be more resilient, more credible, to have more chances? Or do you think when the dates arrive, they will converge and they will sort things out?
I think it's a bit complicated. First of all, you're in a different type of politics now, what I call toxic alliances or alliance politics that has a particular type of dynamic. So enemies become friends, friends become enemies, right? This is a particular type of politics. And by the way, it's in Thailand, it's in Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
It's not something that is actually uncommon. And what we've seen is that Europe had it for many years. Parties on the left and the right started working together. And what happened is that those parties became delegitimized among their political base. And then we saw the rise of new forces. Right? So now we're in a situation where we have these alliance politics that have created a particular type of dynamic that I think are being tested in the Sabah polls. And they will also continue to be tested. The opposition, what we've seen in Malaysian politics was always, a black and white dynamic. You're bad and you're good, and that led to deep polarization in Malaysia, especially here. And now what we're seeing some of that polarization changing. And so, where do forces for the opposition fit within that, and how will it type of evolve? I think. First of all, let's take where the opposition is now. I agree with you. The opposition is lacking leadership. It is divided among itself. But I think if we look at the two partners, Bersatu versus PAS is still very strong, especially among its political base. And that base is not going to go anywhere near, in the near future. I don't expect that PAS will lose the state governments that it has, with perhaps maybe a bit of contest in Perlis. But I think that they have a very strong base on the ground. And it's a different PAS of the past. It's a PAS where there's a sense that they have a sense of destiny of wanting to govern. And I think that is something that will be powerful in shaping that. What will be important for PAS is what happens after Hadiawang. And whether or not that, and the timing of all those issues in that particular area. Now, for Bersatu this is the test for Bersatu right now, and I think that they have chosen. They're a small party, and they've chosen to fight each other. And when you do that, you only become smaller. Sure. And that is what is happening at this particular time. But neither Bersatu nor PAS. Well, I think there have been some exceptions on some key issues. For example, the Urban Renewal Bill, for example, they've raised some very important substantive issues. They haven't been able to go beyond the narrative of we don't like Anwar or go beyond the narrative of let's use racial and religious sentiments. You can't transform Malaysian politics. You can't expect to appeal to the young electorate with these two things. You can get your base, but you won't win the fence sitters.
You won't cross the line.
You won't cross the line.
Yeah.
And this is where Sabah becomes so important, right? It's a showing of how you can cross the line or not in that circumstances, or at least an indication of that. And in fairness, they have a weak base, and it's a different circumstances. But so the opposition is very weak. But that doesn't mean that there won't be new forces that are coming. What we see now is that new forces are emerging very quickly through social media, through the Gen Z's protests, through particular dynamics.
But those forces, they're not electoral kind of forces. I mean, they don't contest election. So how does that impact on the opposition? How will it help the opposition?
Yes and no. I mean, the issues such as the Justice for Zara issue had a big impact on the ground of actualizing young voters. And so issues do really matter. And what we see a lot of youth mobilization in Sabah. I think we'll see a lot of youth mobilization in the Peninsula Malaysia as well. And then what we've seen in Thailand, for example, the emergence of new young forces such as, such as Pita's party, right? People's Power now, right? They move, right? And Future Forward and others. So this has pushed the change, and these parties came out of nowhere in a short period of time. Although they've tapped into forces that have been there for a long time, and those forces are still present in Malaysia. Malaysians want a better government. They want more deliverables. They want better.
Thailand doesn't have a racial problem. I mean, it doesn't have kind of religious kind of.
Malaysia has more obstacles. No. Race and religion is one. You have institutionalized parties that control the space.
Yeah.
So there are, but that doesn't mean you don't have the power of younger forces to emerge to change the discourse and dialogue. Keep in mind, even in 20.
So how do I become the leader of the young forces?
You've passed that mark, I'm afraid.
I know. That's why I'm so sad. I passed the chef life in politics.
When you're older, you can provide and help to provide knowledge.
I can continue in my podcast.
And you can mentor.
I can mentor. Oh.
That's important, you know.
Yeah, I know.
It's really important. Engaging young people keeps you young.
Yeah. Okay, Bridget. I mean, thank you. This is most enlightening, very helpful. I hope the voters or people interested in politics as a whole will listen to this. And but what is your parting advice? I know you said Sabahans go out and vote. Okay? But surely you have something else to add.
I would say three things. Number one, give Sabah her 40% that's due. But do it in a way that they put it into a development fund or something so it's not spent by the leaders, but that there's protections and accountability, right? Because this is the disparities in living conditions in Sabah just have to be addressed. Improving it in Sabah improves it for everybody, right? These things just too short a gap. Don't see the local party sentiment as something that is negative. It's actually something positive. The power of voices. My parting advice to the political parties is improve your game. All right, listen and when you make your elite deals, be conscious that if you do it in such a way, you might.
Can you elaborate? Elite deals.
Well, any government is going to be formed by deals in a hung parliament situation.
Okay.
So when you make those deals, be conscious of what that means for you longer term, all right? And make sure to put the people in the agenda.
I also want to add that when you do the elite deals, obviously you said the governor, the Yang Dipertuan, will have a lot of say. But I hope he will also take into account that what we need is a government of the people and not of the elite. Would you say that is fair? I
think Malaysia needs that overall. And the problem is that there are too many things that are focused on the elites and not enough on its people.
Yes. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you very much. I'm going to buy you lunch.
Thank you. Lovely to see you, Zaid.
Thank you.